Hi, this is Ray Anderson. I want to welcome you again to another episode of Good-Hearted Leadership, people who do well by doing good. Today I've got the pleasure of working with somebody that I not only know as a client, but as a friend, and in many cases a mentor. And it's Tom Brickly. And Tom has been with Brickly Environmental for 35 years, and he's been the CEO since 2000. So without any further ado, let me introduce Tom Brickly. Tom? It's good to see you today. So what I wanted to ask you about, if you can, I want you to share with the audience a little bit about how you got started in this and how it is that you ended up being the CEO of Brickly Environmental.
Well, I'm not the CEO.
Okay.
We just go by president and general manager.
Yeah.
I was the general manager. I was a project manager, worked my way up to general manager, and eventually took over as president when we purchased the company from my father.
Right. Well, tell me a little bit about that. You know, what do you do, and how did you happen to move into this marketplace?
So we're just some bonehead contractors that are trying to make a living,
Right.
and some regulations came along in the early 80s that affected school districts and asbestos, and we were a small family operation with my father and just a couple of his sons working with him. He'd already had one career, and he's working on the second one. And so when the HERA rules were passed in the early 80s through the federal NESHAPs, that K through 12 schools had to identify asbestos.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to remove it, but they had to identify it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of got a little craze going on with school boards and PTAs wanting asbestos removed for the health safety of the students. And an industry was kind of started back then. And since we already kind of specialized in school districts and doing small things with portable classrooms and things like that, it was just a natural for us to get involved in. And we had no idea it would evolve to what it has evolved to, but just in the right place at the right time and done the right thing, and it's been good to us.
Well, tell us a little bit more about who's your customers. What do you do specifically, and how does it fit in with that original start?
Well, it's evolved just like everything's evolved.
Sure.
So I offer more services, but we pretty much have gotten totally out of construction. We don't do anything with construction, but we do a lot more with environmental remediation. And it's a big can. So our specialty is, we work for construction companies and property management companies, anything to do with real estate that has any hazardous waste. Usually it's something we can handle. We don't do nuclear, things like that, but asbestos, lead, mold, PCBs, contaminated soils. We're involved in all that.
And give us some sense of your customer base, because basically you said you started with schools. Who else do you serve, and how far do you reach with that?
Well, we're based out of San Bernardino, and usually all of our work's within a 100-mile radius.
So
we go out of state a little bit, and we go to Northern California, but we try and primarily work throughout Southern California.
So you work with schools, and do you work with military as well, or do you just tell us a little bit about your customer base?
About 50% of our work, if not more, is with government agencies. So it could be a school, could be a university, could be a military base, could be the U.S. Forest Service. Anybody that owns a bunch of real estate usually has to have an environmental remediation company help them with when they do tenant improvements, when they do demolitions, or when they go in and do, they're servicing the building. It's in the floor tiles, it's in the roofing, it's in all sorts of building materials. So the regulations have progressed to the point where you can't even start a remodel or even think about doing a demolition without identifying if there are any hazardous waste, and if there are, they need to be moved properly, and we're here for you.
Right, and what differentiates you from your competitors? Because you're one of the largest in this area. Give us a little sense as to what you think has made you different or has made you more successful.
I think the fact that we started from the beginning and we've remained true to our values and small. We haven't grown and opened up all sorts of offices, and there's a lot more work out there that we could be doing, but you really can't service that work and do it right if you're not personally involved in it. So between my brothers and I and some key staff, we're involved in just about every project.
Obviously, you've grown the business, but tell us a little bit about what happened. We all went through a great recession here just a few years ago. Tell us a little bit about that, and when you get done, what we'd like to do is take a short break and then talk about what you've done since that time.
We were pretty fortunate. I think the crash was pretty much 2008-9, right in there, right. Maybe 2010. There was enough work on the books with the clients that we had that we really didn't see a huge downturn until about 2012. And then the brakes went on big time. Mm-hmm. So it was a real rough year. 2012, 13 were very rough for us. My brother and I, who's a partner in the company with me, we didn't pay ourselves for almost a year. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we didn't have to fire anybody or lay anybody off, but we did have to cut back on hours, and we had to get real creative on how to keep people paid and keep the ship afloat. Fortunately, we're debt free, more or less. I mean, we have no real financing or debt. We have our overhead, of course.
Sure.
We didn't have any debt, and we just hunkered down and got through it.
Well, the truth is, you know, you were one of the companies that actually managed to work their way through that. A lot of people didn't. So we're going to take a short pause, and then when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about how, as a team, you know, with Tom and several other people, we were able to take them and double their top line and more than quadruple their bottom line. So we're going to take a break, and in about 30 seconds we'll come back. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Now we're going to transition to what happened with Brickly Environmental after the bad times. And to join us here to help us with this story is Ed Lasik, who was the former CFO at the Press Enterprise, who worked with us to help. Tom, tell us a little bit, you know, the bad times obviously were there. Tell us a little bit about what happened from 2012 to bring you where you are today.
Well, I was thinking what we were doing wasn't working anymore. I'm going on 60 years old, and the old way of doing things after that major recession, the business wasn't coming back. And we're based out of the Inland Empire, and it was even more depressed than other places. So instead of 60% of our work being done in the Inland Empire, and maybe 40% being in LA, Orange, and San Diego counties, it was the other way around. We were going to LA and San Diego and Ventura to do the majority of our work because their economies were a little bit better. And I just knew that we weren't growing, and we were getting a little stagnant, and we'd always been used to growing up till the recession, and it just kind of happened by giving good service and taking care of our customers. So I knew that I needed some help. I needed to reach out a little bit and started doing some homework, and I was referred to you to start with. And you were able to come into the company with your consulting company and look at best practices and how people communicate, and working from the bottom up versus the top down, and getting us some ETP credits, I believe, that paid to have you come in, paid to take time out from our workday and train our employees and give them a chance to have a voice in what was going on. And that, over a period of a couple of years, has helped a great deal. And then also Ed Lasik came in. I've known Ed for a long time through some other associations we have, and he was more than happy to come and take a look at our bottom line and our numbers, and the two of you seemed to get along pretty well. And by putting together a strategic plan and best practices and meeting all the players, you guys said we're not operating anywhere near the potential we should operate or potentially could operate, and you helped us really turn things around.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, what I'm going to do, Ed, help us out a little bit, because you've known Tom for a long time, and you know, obviously there was a trusted relationship that had been built. You know, when you came in, tell us a little bit about what you saw and why you made the recommendations you did in terms of the strategic planning.
Well, first and foremost, I want to mention here, this was a great opportunity to be invited into a place to look at their operation and find opportunities to improve. Because most people you talk to don't have the time to talk about how to improve their company. Tom did. Tom had the vision to look forward and say, we need to do things differently. So what do we need to do differently to be more profitable and to secure the future of this company into the future? So that's what was exciting to me. So when I started digging into the numbers, as I always do, I got real excited, and all kinds of opportunities started to pop up of what we could do to make this company more profitable. And it was always great to have a senior group as you and Tom available to talk about what we could do, what was possible and what wasn't possible, so we could focus on the opportunity at hand. And the first thing we did, and probably the most important thing that started the whole process, we developed a strategic planning group of the management team. And we brought them into the room and we started talking about how can we make this company more profitable? How can we secure our futures with Brickly Environmental? And that's what drove everything. And we started with the typical SWOT analysis, which for those that may not understand what that is, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we raised those questions with the management team and came up with a pretty compelling story and identified about 10 or 11 different initiatives that we needed to embark upon to make the improvements necessary to our bottom line to make this company something to speak of in the future. And to make it very simple, we came up with this concept of we want to double our revenue over the next 5 years, and we want to increase our profitability tenfold.
No, and that was a good start. You know, the question that I have for you, you know, one of the challenges that I think Ed and I have both been through, not everybody's receptive to this kind of stuff. Tell us a little bit about the mindset that you were going through as you were bringing it back out, and what kind of led you to bring us in, because we were outside. And my guess is you weren't met with a lot of enthusiasm from the inside when you started talking about that. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
You got to try something. So you can read all the books you want. You can talk to all the friends you want.
Right.
And I've always been a big believer that most of the people around me are a lot smarter than I am. So why not go learn what I can learn? Your consulting company had a lot of value, and the fact that you were able to say, I'm going to be able to pay for myself and have you guys earn some tax credits back, so all this training is going to be reimbursed. When you're talking to a business person, they're looking at the bottom line and what's this going to cost me. Usually consultants are very expensive and they're a little esoteric and they really don't know what they're talking about when it comes down to your bottom line. So you were able to pay for yourself, so that made it a lot easier, Ray. And it took about a year, you know, it did, and some of the things you did we didn't understand and we weren't necessarily all on board, but after we saw the results, and after people started coming around and the employees started changing, and we were able to get our employees and everybody engaged in what are the real challenges and what do we need to do to stay busy and have the clients continue to use us and not even want to talk to the competition? How do we raise the bar to be exceptional in everything we do, from answering the telephone to locking up the doors at night? You helped us do that, and the best way to do that is not to tell your employees, to ask your employees how to do it. And you did that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's one of the things that you guys took to heart, is that basically you got all that brain power down there, and it's either working for you, or it's in neutral, or it's working against you, and I think that was important.
We went, a couple of years of just kind of letting the business run along on its own, on status quo. We weren't growing, we were stagnating, we were going backwards, and we'd never gone backwards before, and it scared me, and I frankly didn't know what to do, so I reached out for some help, and I talked to other consultants, I looked at other things of doing, and we gave you a chance, and you're still with us. It's been 5 years, I think you've been with us, and Ed's been with us about 3 years, and the numbers speak for themselves. So,
well, tell us, because I think if we can, Ed brings a skill set that's radically different than mine, and I think what I've benefited from in this relationship is that I've learned a lot from both of you, and I've tried to stay in my skill set and permit Ed to stay in his, and the thing that I've seen in there is that you were able to manage that from an internal perspective that kind of overcame objections on the inside that were a challenge.
Nobody likes change, and everybody's leery of somebody coming in saying that they can make things better, so you just have to go through the steps, and once the proof is there, and the proof with Ed's help was in the numbers. So the numbers proved it. And now, of course, the greatest thing too is the economy's finally turned around. So we were very well positioned after doing all this homework the last couple of years for when the economy took off and got better, that we were able to get a little bit of a synergistic effect out of all this, and we're really moving ahead now, and the numbers look real good.
No, it's exciting.
Yes.
Well, Ed, if you can, help us understand a little bit about what you've learned in terms of the organization and why this working with Tom is really kind of crystallized in your mind what it takes to be able to help a company move forward. Because both you and I know very few people do exit planning at all.
And Ray, the only thing I'd like to say is you're really not working with me. I'm just one of the partners, one of the team. You're working with Brickly. You guys know everybody there. You know all of our management. You know every one of our workers. And so it's a team effort. It's not a Tom effort.
No, and I didn't want at all minimize the impact of everything. But in order for this to happen, somebody's got to take the lead. It's like in every organization. In order to make the change, somebody's got to say, hey, something's got to change here, and it's not easy to be able to have that happen, so to speak. So Ed, going back to the question I posed for you, as you were looking at this, what encouraged you and how did you feel like we could make this happen based on the fact that, there'd been a struggle before?
It was really exciting to work with an ownership group that wanted to improve and had the time devoted to support us, so that when we were coming up with recommendations from the team and from ourselves, everything was on the table. It was a transparent process with all the ownership and all the employees. We all got to weigh into it, and then we figured out what was the best way of moving forward. And we weren't just looking in the short term, we were looking all for a long-term solution, because we wanted to tie this into increasing the valuation of the company. And that's the most important aspect of this thing. And if we ask most people if they understand what their company is really valued, they have no clue. They have ideas in their mind, but they've never had it professionally appraised. And that's what we're doing with Brickly, and we do it every year, and we will be measuring against the appraisal standards how well we're moving the company forward. So that was a big part of it. But again, as we talked about, and you mentioned exit strategies, every good company has to have an exit strategy. Otherwise, its future is not secured. Because once the founding fathers are no longer involved in the business, then others have to step up and take a more active role. And if they don't know what they're doing and they're not properly trained, the value of the company is going to go down significantly, and the company could end up going out of business. So it's very important that you plan for an exit strategy, and it's not a one-year exit strategy, and it's not just one option. I think we're up to about 10 different options we're looking at right now for this company. And what makes it powerful is the combination of the different options, because that's the way we're probably going to go, with some type of variation of various different options for the best solution for Tom and his family.
Well, and I think the neat thing that the door you opened up, Tom, was that I've always known that if you really want to grow a company, you got to grow it from the people inside, whether they're in executive management or frontline. What you guys did that I thought was unique, we started working directly with the supervisors, in which we invited them in, and you guys listened. And the point that I've seen in my own experience is when you listen, people tend to change their attitude. And what we've been able to see over the past 3 years, that we've worked directly with either the supervisor leads, they've come to trust you. They come to understand when you ask them something that something's going to be done. It's not just talk. Tell us a little bit about that from your perspective, because I think that was it seems like that was one of your concerns as we started working together.
The way you normally do things from the top down, you're pretty sure that that's working and everybody hears you loud and clear. You can still be nice to people and understanding, but the bottom line is you're telling them what to do and how to do it. It's a little bit different when you start saying, what do you think? How do you think we should do it? Do you have any ideas? And when we started asking those kind of questions, and the goal was to increase our productivity by 20%. And that didn't happen overnight, but the only way it did happen is by asking them for their ideas. And whether it came down to how some modifications to the vehicles, to how we load the vehicles, to how we do drive time, to how we use lead men and workers differently, they had the solutions. We just never really asked them, and that really helped a lot. And it engaged them, and it gave them some ownership and some power in decisions. And now we actually run the operation a whole lot different now because of that.
Well, I think it's kind of fascinating. One of the concepts that Ed brought in the business, because we were measuring things like productivity, which I wasn't capable of doing, and he brought it in and he said, we need to get rid of the sewer monkeys. And we all remember that expression. Tell us a little bit about what that means and how you've been able to eliminate people who are not really well suited for where you were trying to go.
Well, in our business, and it's probably not unique to any other business, but it's difficult to get people with a certain skill set, and it's hard labor, and it's risky. It can be an unsafe job if things aren't done a certain way. They're wearing hazmat suits. They're wearing full respirators. They're wearing special foot gear. They're working with power tools. They're working in harsh environments, and so not everybody can do that type of work. And it takes certifications, it takes medical backgrounds, it takes schooling. And when you have a person that meets those qualifications and they're working for you, you send a crew out, you need a supervisor and 6 men, you got a crew made. But consequently, just trying to be nice guys, and you're not going out of your way to say, are all these guys meeting the standards and the levels that you've put out there for them? There's always 1 or 2 that are hanging back or maybe holding back the crew or just aren't up to par. We did not do a real good job of setting what that standard was and holding everybody to that standard, and consequently, a few people skip by a little bit and they hold you back, and they also can bring down the whole crew sometimes with a bad attitude and with safety records, and from not really being a company person, being more of a individual or a me person. So we've been able to, with your help, come up with a grading scale and input from the lead men and the supervisors, what workers are not up to standard, give an opportunity to get up to standard or move on. And we've moved several of them on.
And you know, and from my perspective, the impact on that on the supervisors was they again felt you guys were listening. You know, instead of them having to drag somebody along, they suddenly realized you were willing to make the changes that made their job easier and made things work more effectively, which ultimately, Ed, ended up meeting the criteria you had. So tell us a little bit about that, because I think, you know, this productivity, you know, you established some milestones that people wouldn't normally think about.
Well, it's really interesting when you want to double your revenue as one of your goals. If you don't do anything else in the company, you'll double your revenue, and maybe if you're lucky, you might double your bottom line. But that's not the synergistic effect that we were trying to transform for this company. We wanted to double our revenue and grow our bottom line tenfold. To do that, you need increases in productivity.
Right.
And that's where you came into play, working with Tom and the crews in trying to figure out better ways of doing the job so we were more productive.
Kind of to wrap things up for you guys and for the show, tell us, you know, if you can, Tom, was there one thing that really stands out in this transition? You know, tell us a little bit about what you think is the most significant thing that's happened.
No, there's not one thing. We're operating with about 20 things we're doing different than we were. So I'd say the biggest thing was bringing you two on board and listening to what you had and giving us the opportunity to do it. So we've done that. We've gone to the point now where we're ahead of projections. We're ahead of track. So we're doing really good number-wise. Now we don't want to rest on our laurels. We need to keep moving ahead, but I don't think we need to keep running at the level we are. Let's maintain what we have, keep it going, fine-tune it, and keep the machine running well. And consequently, now we're working more on exit strategies for the key members and passing the company off to the next generation. And that'll take several years also, so that's what we're working on. Ed can probably go into a little more detail about the numbers and what all we've done, but it's a collaboration of everything, Ray.
No, and I think that's a neat thing. I know, personally speaking, it's been fun to work in a team in which everybody's working together, and that means not only the three of us here, but the entire Brickly environmental is participating. Ed, give us some, summary from your perspective.
Well, I'm happy to report after 3 years, we met our revenue goal. We have doubled our revenue, and we have increased the profitability eightfold.
Wow.
So we got a little bit more room to go on the bottom line, but we have the initiatives in place to get us there, and the enthusiasm, and all the ideas that we need to make this thing work, and all the support from the Brickly management team and ownership. And it's been a really rewarding experience from my perspective. And it comes back to, you got to work with people that want to change, because as Tom stated at the beginning of the meeting, it's wicked hard to change. So you got to want to change, you got to want improvement. And those are the type of people we want to work with. Yeah. People that have the time to want to make their operation more effective, more profitable, and at the same time, look for exit strategies that's going to secure the security of the business long term.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want to thank both Tom and Ed for coming in on this show. And this is another episode of Good Heart Leadership. We appreciate your watching, and stay tuned. We're going to be doing another one next month. Thank you very much.